The wheat fields of Halden's Reach were turning gold under a soft afternoon sun when the sky split open. Farmers looked up first. They had been watching the weather for the harvest, not for war. The clouds tore apart in long burning lines as Vorask drop pods punched through the atmosphere. There was no warning, no siren. The colony's single defense station went silent in less than an hour, its broken pieces falling like slow rain over the eastern hills. A man named Captain Wren was driving a supply truck along the ridge road when the first pod hit the valley below. The shockwave threw his truck against a tree. He climbed out with blood on his face and watched the colony he had defended for 9 years die in front of him. He grabbed his rifle, his radio, and a small bag of food, then ran into the forest before the Vorask patrols swept the road. The Vorask were tall and gray-skinned, with thick armor plates grown into their shoulders. They moved in clean lines and fired without hurry. The colonists fought back, farmers with old hunting rifles, teachers with kitchen knives. A retired soldier named Old Bren held the South Road alone for almost 20 minutes before he fell. None of it mattered. By sunset, the colony was in chains. The Vorask field commander walked through the smoking streets like a man inspecting a market. His name was Drevak. He had crushed 9 species before this one. He was tired of long wars and slow surrenders. Humans, he had been told, were stubborn. He had a plan for stubborn species. Drevak ordered the survivors gathered in the central square. Men and women on one side, children on the other. The mothers screamed. The fathers fought and were beaten down. Drevak watched without expression as his soldiers dragged the children, some no older than 5, toward the reinforced prisoner cages near the landing field. The cages had been built for enemy soldiers. The bars were thick. The locks were heavy. They were not built for children, and that was exactly the point. A young Vorask officer named Senar stood at the edge of the square. His hands were tight on his weapon. He was new to this kind of work. He had been raised on stories of glorious conquest, not this. He stepped forward and spoke quietly to Drevak. "Commander, the cages are for soldiers, not for these. There are other ways." Drevak did not even turn his head. "There are no other ways with humans. Break the young. The old will follow. Step back, officer." Senar stepped back. He kept his mouth shut. He watched a small girl with a torn yellow dress get pushed into the largest cage. She did not cry. She just stared at him with eyes that looked far too old. Senar would carry that look for the rest of his life. By the time the second moon rose, every child on Halden's Reach was behind bars. The adults were marched to the labor camps near the river. Drevak sent his report to the Vorask High Command and asked them to broadcast it across the galactic network as a warning. He wanted every other human world to see. He wanted them to learn fear before the fleet even arrived. The broadcast went out that same night. Footage of cages, footage of children pressed against the bars, footage of Drevak standing in front of them with his arms crossed, smiling. The galaxy saw it. Some species cheered. The Kren, who had always hated humans, raised glasses in their high towers. The Albari traders laughed and made jokes about cheap human goods soon to flood the market. A few smaller worlds stayed quiet, unsure what to think. But the older species, the ones who had watched humanity for a long time, went cold. On the green world of Melis, an ambassador named Velna watched the broadcast in her quiet office. She watched it 3 times. Then she stood up, walked to her window, and stared at the rain for a long while. She had lived among humans once long ago. She had seen what they did when they were hurt. She had seen what they did when their families were threatened. She knew in her bones that the Vorask had just signed something they could not unsign. She turned to her assistant. "Send a message to the Vorask leadership, right now." "What should it say, Ambassador?" Velna closed her eyes. "Tell them to release the children. Tell them to leave that colony and go home. Tell them they have one chance. Tell them I am begging." The assistant blinked. "Begging, Ambassador?" "Yes, begging. Because if they do not listen, no one in this galaxy will be able to help them. Not me, not the Council, not their gods." The message was sent. The Voresk High Command read it within the hour. They laughed at it. They forwarded it to Drevak with a joke attached. Drevak read it on his command pad, snorted, and tossed it aside. Far away, in a forest on Halden's Reach, Captain Wren finally reached the buried relay he had helped install years ago. He dug it up with his bare hands. He connected his radio. He sent a short coded burst across the long dark to Earth. He sent only 4 words. They caged the kids. The message bounced through 6 relay stations and landed on a quiet desk in the Sol Alliance Command Center 40 minutes later. The officer who read it sat very still. Then she stood up, walked down the hall, and knocked on a door that had not been knocked on in 12 years. Inside that room, an old plan was opened. And humanity, for 3 full days, said absolutely nothing. 3 days of silence is a long time when you are waiting for a scream. The galactic news networks did not understand it at first. Reporters camped outside the human embassy on the neutral world of Tassin. They shouted questions through closed doors. They demanded statements. They got nothing. The human flag still flew above the building. The lights inside were still on. But every human inside had stopped answering calls and stopped responding to any signal from any species. It was as if a wall of glass had dropped between humanity and the rest of the universe. On the second day, the Albari traders who had laughed at the broadcast started to grow nervous. Their ships in human space were not being attacked, but they were being watched, quietly. Human patrol craft sat off their hulls and said nothing. The Albari captains tried to make small talk over the radio. The human pilots did not answer. They just watched. The Albari turned their ships around and went home. On the third day, the Kren ambassador requested an emergency meeting with the Human Council. He was told the Human Council was unavailable. He asked when they would be available. He was told they would be available when they were ready. Inside the Sol Alliance Command Center, a different kind of work was happening. Old officers who had retired years ago walked back through the doors without being called. They sat down at empty desks, turned on the consoles, and got to work. Factories on Mars switched their production lines overnight. Tractor plants began building landing craft. Civilian shipyards started welding armor onto cargo haulers. A teacher in a small town in Kenya woke her husband and told him she was reactivating her commission. He nodded, kissed her forehead, and started packing her bag. The Sol Alliance leader, a woman named President Kara Voss, did not make a speech. She walked into her office on the morning after Wren's message, closed the door, and sent a single sentence to every human across every world. Bring them home. That was all. No flag waving, no promises of revenge. Just 3 words that meant only one thing to every human who read them. The mothers in their kitchens read it and went quiet. The factory workers read it and started a second shift without being asked. The old soldiers read it and pulled their uniforms out of dusty boxes. The children, the ones who were still safe, read it and asked their parents what it meant. Their parents told them the truth. Other children needed help. The whole family was going to help bring them home. On Halden's Reach, the Voresk did not understand any of this. They saw the silence and called it weakness. Drevak grew bolder. He let his soldiers walk through the colony with their helmets off, mocking the captives. He raised his demands on the labor camps. He cut the food rations to the children in the cages, just to test how soft the humans really were. Senar, the young officer, walked past the cages every night on his rounds. He carried his weapon. He kept his face blank. But each night when no one was watching, he left small things on the ground near the bars. A piece of his own ration bread, a folded blanket, a small cup of clean water. He never spoke to the children. He never looked at them directly. But the little girl in the yellow dress always picked up what he left, and she always shared it with the smallest ones first. He did not know why he did it. He just knew he could not stop. 2 more human outer worlds were hit by the Voresk in those 3 days. Smaller colonies, mining stations. The Voresk thought they were pressing an advantage. Each strike was added to the broadcast as a new warning. Each one was watched in silence by Earth. Ambassador Velna of the Melon tried again. She flew personally to the Vorask capital. She walked into their council chamber with her head high and her voice steady. She told them plainly what she believed was coming. She told them about a war her own ancestors had once witnessed, long before the Vorask were even a real power, when humans had been pushed too far by a different species and had spent 10 years burning that species off the map of the galaxy. She told them that no one remembered the name of that species anymore, because there was no one left to remember it. The Vorask Council laughed. One of them, an old general with a scar across his throat, leaned forward and said, "Ambassador, with respect, your stories are charming, but these humans have not even fired a shot in 3 days. They are crying behind closed doors. They are not coming." Velna looked at him for a long moment. Then she stood, gathered her papers, and walked out without another word. In the hallway, her assistant asked if she had any more options to try. Velna shook her head. "No, they will not listen. Their pride is too loud." "What do we do, Ambassador?" Velna looked out the tall windows at the Voresk city below. Spires of black stone, banners of conquest. "We get our people out of this city," she said quietly, "tonight." On the third evening of the silence, a small fishing boat off the coast of Spain watched the sky. Old men with rough hands stood on the deck and pointed up. A ship was rising, then another, then 100, then 1,000. Across every human world, fleets were lifting off the ground at the exact same minute, not loudly, not in celebration, just rising into the dark sky in long, quiet lines like a tide finally pulling back its strength. The silence was over. Something else was beginning. 11 days, that was how long it took. The Vorask patrol ships above Halden's Reach were playing a card game in their break room when their long-range sensors lit up with so many contacts that the system thought it was broken. The duty officer slapped the side of the console. He rebooted it. The numbers came back the same. Then they doubled. Then they tripled. He looked at the screen for a long second, then he ran. By the time the alarm reached Drevak's command tent on the surface, the human fleet was already in the system. They came out of jump in a wide circle around the planet like wolves stepping out of the trees at the same moment. The ships were not pretty. They were not new. They were not painted in proud colors. They were scarred and patched and built for one purpose only. Every soft thing inside them had been stripped out. There were no comfortable chairs on the bridges, no flags, no windows, just steel and guns and people with very quiet faces. At the center of the formation was an old battle carrier named the Steady Hand. Its commander was a man named Admiral Owen Holt. He was 63 years old. He had retired 4 years ago and gone home to a small house in the hills of Vermont. He had a wife named Carla and a grandson named Sam. Sam had been 7 years old. Sam had been visiting his cousins on Halden's Reach when the Vorask came. Sam was in a cage now. Holt had walked back into the command center the morning the broadcast aired. He had not said a single word about Sam. He had simply asked for his ship back. They gave it to him. Now he sat in his command chair and keyed his transmitter. His voice was calm, almost gentle. "Vorask forces in orbit and on the ground. This is Admiral Holt of the Sol Alliance. You have 1 hour to release every human prisoner on the surface, to lay down your weapons, and to wait for our forces to receive your surrender. If you choose to fight, you will not survive this day. Make your choice." The Vorask fleet commander in orbit, a captain named Corvan, listened to the message twice. Then he laughed. He had 200 warships under his command. He had 4 cruisers the size of cities. He had been told the human fleet was small and afraid. He looked at his screen and counted the human ships. There were perhaps 150. He sent a reply, "Come and try, human." The hour passed in silence. When the hour ended, Holt did not give a long speech. He simply turned to his weapons officer and said, "Now." What happened next was not a battle the way the Vorask understood battles. There was no slow trading of fire. The human ships moved like a single living thing. Small ships darted ahead in tight pairs, hitting the same weak points on the Vorask cruisers that Vorask engineers themselves had complained about for years. The humans had been listening, reading, watching. They knew where to hit. The first Vorask cruiser broke apart in 8 minutes. Its reactor went up in a quiet, bright flash. Corvin stared at the empty space where his flagship sister had been and felt, for the first time in his career, real fear. Human pilots in small fighters wove between the larger ships like fish through coral. They did not seem to care about their own safety. They did not pull away when they were hit. They kept pushing forward until their targets were dead. One pilot, a young woman named HFY Patel, took out 3 Vorask gunboats by herself before her own engine failed. She did not eject. She rammed a 4th. Her wingman saw it happen and said only one word into the radio. Acknowledged. By the 30-minute mark, half the Vorask orbital fleet was gone. By the 40th minute, Corvin's own ship was burning. He gave the order to abandon. He was picked up later, floating in a survival pod, and treated kindly by human medics who did not say a word to him. The kindness was somehow worse than anger. Holt did not celebrate. He turned to his ground commander and gave the next order. On the surface, Drevek was screaming into his radio. He could not reach his fleet. He could not reach his high command. The sky above Halden's Reach was full of falling Vorask ships, lighting up the clouds like dying stars. He grabbed his second-in-command, an officer named Rack, and ordered him to move the children deeper into the mountain bunker. "We will use them," Drevek said. "The humans will not bomb their own young. We hold the children, they negotiate, we survive." Rack nodded and ran to carry out the order. Senar heard the order from his position near the cages. He looked at the little girl in the yellow dress. She was holding the hand of a smaller boy. She was watching Senar with those old eyes again. Senar made a choice he had been making slowly for 11 days, one piece at a time. He walked to the bunker control panel before Rack arrived. He keyed in his officer code. He disabled every lock on the inner doors. He disabled the override systems. He disabled the emergency seals. Then he typed one more command that wiped his own code from the records, so no one would know which officer had done it. He walked away from the panel just as the first human dropships entered the upper atmosphere. The sky turned dark with them. Senar slipped into the forest. He did not look back. Rain started falling on Halden's Reach, just as the first human boots touched the ground. It was a soft, steady rain, the kind that made the wheat fields smell like old earth and rising bread. The Vorask soldiers on the perimeter wiped water from their visors and watched the dropships open. They had been told humans would be slow on a hostile world. They had been told humans needed time to organize and plant their flags. The humans skipped all of that. They came off the ramps already moving, already shooting, already inside the Vorask lines before the Vorask understood the lines were broken. A Marine sergeant named Theo Pell led the 3rd squad off the 2nd dropship. He was 41 years old. He had 3 daughters at home in Oregon. The youngest was 8, the same age as some of the children in the cages. Pell did not think about that as he moved. He had trained himself not to think about it. He could think about it later. Right now there was only the next corner, the next door, the next breath. His squad moved through the outer fields in a wide spread. They did not pause to take cover. Cover meant time. Time was the enemy. They walked into Vorask fire and shot back without breaking pace. 2 of his Marines went down in the first minute. Pell did not stop to grieve. He kept moving. The rest of the squad kept moving with him. The Vorask had built their main defensive line around the colony's central square, the same square where they had separated the children from their parents 11 days ago. They had heavy guns mounted on rooftops. They had snipers in the church tower. They had a full company of elite troops dug in behind the old grain silos. It was a good defense. It would have held against most species in the galaxy. It did not hold for 1 hour. Human Marines came at the line from 4 directions at once. They had drone scouts mapping every Voresk position in real time. They had sniper teams that did not miss. They had a quiet kind of fury that did not waste energy on shouting. Pell led his squad around the eastern flank, through a drainage tunnel that the Voresk had not even bothered to guard, and came up behind the silos. His squad cleared the dug-in company in 14 minutes. Pell took a round in the shoulder. He kept moving. By the time the rain stopped, the Voresk defensive line was gone. Deep under the mountain in the bunker, Rack was trying to lock the inner doors and finding that none of the controls worked. He pulled cables out of the wall. He smashed panels with the butt of his rifle. Nothing responded. The locks were dead. The doors were free. He keyed his radio with shaking hands. "Commander, the locks are sabotaged. We cannot hold the children inside." Drevak's voice came back ragged. "Then put a guard at every door. Hold the children with your own bodies if you have to." "Commander, there are 78 children. I have 19 soldiers." "Then make them count." The line went dead. Rack looked at his 19 soldiers. He looked at the long corridor of bunker doors. He thought of his own daughter at home. He thought of the broadcast they had all watched and laughed at. He lowered his rifle. "Stand down," he said quietly. "All of you, put your weapons on the floor, step away from the doors. When the humans come, do not move. Do not speak. We are going to live through this if we can." His soldiers obeyed. They were tired, they were afraid, they were ready to be told the truth. Pell's squad reached the bunker entrance 40 minutes later. They moved through the corridors in tight formation, breaching each door with practiced speed. They found Rack and his men sitting on the floor with their hands behind their heads. Pell did not shoot them. He did not waste words on them. He had 2 of his Marines bind their wrists and move them out of the way. He pushed on. At the end of the longest corridor, behind the heaviest door, were the cages. The door was already unlocked. Pell pushed it open with the barrel of his rifle. The smell hit him first, then the sound. Children crying, children whispering, children breathing too fast, then the sight. 78 small faces looking up at him, dirty and thin and terrified. The little girl in the yellow dress was at the front of the largest cage. She was holding the smallest boy in her arms. She did not cry when she saw Pell. She just stared at him with those old eyes. Pell took off his helmet. He set his rifle down on the floor very slowly. He walked forward with his empty hands open. He knelt down in front of the cage so his face was level with the little girl's face. "My name is Theo," he said. His voice cracked once and he cleared his throat. "I have 3 little girls at home. We are going to take you home now, all of you, every single one. Is that all right?" The little girl looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded just once. She started to cry, quietly, like she had been holding it in for 11 days and had forgotten how to let it out properly. Pell's Marines moved behind him, cutting the locks, opening the doors, lifting the smallest children out first. Some of the Marines were crying too. None of them said a word about it. Outside, on the surface, Drevek was caught trying to take a colonist family as personal hostages. Rack's second-in-command shot him in the back of the head before he could fire. Then he laid down his weapon and waited. The colony was retaken before sunset. The medical ship, Hope's Return, left Halden's Reach at dawn with every child aboard. It was a slow ship. It was not built for speed. It was built to keep small bodies warm and small minds calm. Its corridors were painted in soft yellows and pale blues. Its medics wore civilian clothes instead of uniforms. Its captain was a grandmother who had volunteered for the run the moment she heard the silence end on day 3. She had baked cookies for the children before they even boarded. She had baked too many. That was fine. There would be more journeys. The Galaxy expected Admiral Holt to come home with the medical ship. The Galaxy was wrong. Holt held a short meeting on the bridge of the Steady Hand the same evening the colony was retaken. His officers stood in a half-circle around him. He looked tired. He looked old, but his voice was steady. "We do not stop here," he said. "Earth has given me full authority. We move on every Vorask outpost on the path back to their capital. Every one of them gets the same offer the orbital fleet got. Release any captives. Lay down arms. Stand down. If they refuse, we end them. His weapons officer asked the question carefully. Sir, how many of these outposts are we talking about? Holt looked at the star map. 43. The bridge was very quiet for a long moment. Sir, said his executive officer, the Council is going to call this a war of conquest. The Council can call it whatever it wants, Holt said. I am calling it a lesson. We are not going home until the lesson is finished. The fleet jumped that same night. The first Vorask outpost was a mining station on a cold gray moon. Its commander received Holt's transmission and tried to negotiate. Holt did not negotiate. The commander tried again. Holt gave him 10 minutes to comply. The commander surrendered with 1 minute to spare. He was treated fairly. His soldiers were taken into custody and fed. The captive workers, 1,200 of them from 6 different species, were freed and sent home on neutral transports paid for by the Sol Alliance. The second outpost tried to fight. It did not last 20 minutes. The third outpost surrendered before Holt's fleet even arrived. The fourth did the same. The fifth. The sixth. Word moved through the galactic network faster than the human fleet itself. The Albari traders pulled every ship they had out of Vorask space. The Kren ambassador, who had been so loud a week ago, stopped giving interviews. The smaller worlds that had stayed quiet during the broadcast now sent quiet messages to Earth, asking if there was any way they could help. Earth thanked them politely and asked only that they keep their borders open for refugees. They did. On a cold transit ship in the middle of nowhere, a young Vorask in civilian clothes walked up to a human boarding officer and surrendered himself. He gave his name as Senar. He said he had been an officer on Halden's Reach. He said he was the one who had unlocked the bunker doors. He said he wanted to help. The human officer did not shoot him. The officer fed him, gave him a blanket, and put him on a transport to the Sol Alliance command ship. Their Senar was interviewed for 3 days by quiet people who took careful notes and did not raise their voices. He told them everything. The names of the Vorask High Command, the locations of their hidden bases, the structure of their orders, the secret codes their fleet used. He also told them about the little girl in the yellow dress. He cried when he told that part. The interviewers let him cry. They did not interrupt. Word that Senar had been treated fairly spread among Vorask prisoners on every captured outpost. They started to talk too, some out of fear, some out of guilt, some because they had been waiting their whole lives for someone to ask them the right questions. The intelligence flooded in. Ambassador Velna of the Melon watched all of this from her embassy on Tassin. She filed long reports back to her own government. Her conclusions were not gentle. This is not a war of conquest, she wrote. This is a correction. Humanity is removing the Vorask as a power in this galaxy. They are not annexing the worlds. They are not enslaving the populations. They are dismantling a system. We have not seen this before in our lifetimes. We may not see it again. By the third week, Holt's fleet was deep inside Vorask core space. The Vorask High Command sent panicked messages through every diplomatic channel they could find. They offered concessions. They offered reparations. They offered to put Drevak's entire family on trial as a gesture of good faith. They did not yet know Drevak was already dead. Holt read each message. He forwarded each one to Earth without comment. President Voss took the calls personally. She did not raise her voice. She did not make demands in the usual way. She simply listened to the Vorask leaders, let them finish, and then asked the same question every time. Are you ready to surrender? The Vorask leaders sputtered. They tried to negotiate. They tried to argue. They tried to threaten. Voss listened patiently each time and then asked the same question again. Are you ready to surrender? On the 28th day after the rescue, the Vorask High Command finally sent a different message. It was short. Yes, we surrender. Please tell us your terms. Voss read it twice. She closed her eyes for a moment. She thought of Sam Holt and the little girl in the yellow dress and the children on the Hope's Return who were just now arriving home to their families. She opened her eyes. She began to type. The peace document was signed in a plain conference room on the neutral world of Tassin, on a wooden table that had been carried in from a local farmhouse, because the official ones felt too grand. President Voss wanted it that way. She did not want banners. She did not want flags behind her chair. She did not want a stage. She wanted a table, a chair, a pen, and a clear list of conditions. The Vorask delegation walked in expecting ceremony. They got a tired woman in a gray coat who slid a single document across the table and waited. The terms were not long. The Vorask Dominion was dissolved. Its central government was disbanded. Its military was stripped down to a small planetary defense force, monitored by a joint council of species. Every world the Vorask had ever conquered was given the immediate right to self-rule, with transition support from the Sol Alliance for as long as those worlds asked for it. Every Vorask officer who had given direct orders connected to the Halden's Reach raid was named in an attached list and would face a joint court of every species the Vorask had ever harmed. The court would not be human. Voss had insisted on that. The verdict would not be a human verdict. It would be a galactic one. The most surprising clause was the last one. Humanity took no Vorask territory for itself, not one moon, not one mining station, not one square mile. The home world of the Vorask remained Vorask. Their culture was not erased. Their language was not banned. They were simply, completely, no longer an empire. The Vorask delegation read the document 3 times. They looked for a trick. They could not find one. The lead delegate, an old senator named Vossen, looked up at President Voss with confusion in his eyes. "You took nothing for yourselves," he said. "We took our children home," Voss answered. "That is all we came for." Vossen signed. The galaxy spent the next year processing what had happened. Old alliances cracked open. New ones formed. The species that had cheered when the broadcast first aired sent quiet apologies to Earth. Earth accepted them politely and did not make a list. A new council was formed on Tassin, larger and slower and more careful than the old one. Humans served on it but did not lead it. They had made their point. They did not need to make it again. Senar lived. He served his sentence in a fair court and was given a reduced term because of his actions on Halden's Reach. After his release, he went home to the Vorask capital and became a teacher. He taught young Vorask about what their empire had done and what their empire had become. He was not loved for this. He did not need to be. The little girl in the yellow dress, whose name was Myra, wrote him a letter when she was 12 years old. She thanked him for the bread and the blanket and the water. She told him she was learning to play the violin. She told him she hoped he was well. Senar kept the letter in a wooden frame on his desk for the rest of his life. Sergeant Theopel went home to Oregon. He did not stay in the Marines. He could not somehow. He bought a small farm with apple trees and goats and spent the rest of his working years quietly. Once a year, on the anniversary of the rescue, he flew to Halden's Reach. The children he had carried out of those cages, now growing up, came to see him. They called him Uncle Theo. They brought their own children eventually. The youngest of them sat on his lap and pulled his gray beard. He laughed every time. Admiral Owen Holt retired again, this time for good. His grandson Sam came home thin and quiet but whole. Sam grew up. He became a doctor. Holt watched him graduate from medical school from the front row in a suit that did not fit him quite right anymore. Holt refused every medal that was offered for the Halden's Reach campaign. He was offered the highest honor the Sol Alliance could give. He turned it down in a short letter. He wrote, "The only reward I wanted was to bring them home. I already received it. Please give the medal to someone who needs it more." Captain Wren, the man who had sent the forward message from the forest, was found 3 weeks after the rescue, alive but starving, by a Marine patrol. He recovered. He went back to his colony. He helped rebuild it. He never spoke much about what he had seen. Ambassador Velna of the Melon wrote her final report to her government a year after the war ended. The report was long, but it ended with a single short paragraph that her government quoted for centuries afterward, and that every Melon child eventually learned by heart. Do not threaten a human child, not in jest, not in anger, not in war. They will hear you across the stars. They will come without speeches. They will come without warning. They will come and they will not stop until their young are safe. This is not a thing you can negotiate with. This is not a thing you can buy off. This is what they are. On Halden's Reach, the cages were taken down. The metal was melted and reshaped. A simple monument was built on the edge of the central square, where the children had once been separated from their parents. It was a low wall of dark metal with 78 small handprints pressed into it, one for each child. Across the base of the wall, 3 words were carved. They came home. Visitors still leave flowers there, even now, even after all this time. The galaxy did not forget. It still has not.